And then I will get my screen back up. I think I'm just going to go a couple minutes back.
And I think my advice to childcare advocates would be that in my experience, 9 times out of 10, these businesses want to be part of the solution. And what is overwhelming is when maybe a childcare advocate will come with the solution that is sort of like fully baked and is like, here is what we need you to do. And so either like, get in line or sign on versus sort of like having those conversations, learning a little bit about like whether it's an individual business, whether it's a chamber, being like, what are your stressors? What are your priorities? What kind of things are you dedicating hours to that keep you up at night? And then talking about childcare as a solution to some of those problems. And so rather than like, hey, we need $200 million. We need you to get on board. Like that sort of, that's going to be like, I'm sorry, what? Versus like, hey, we work with childcare providers who are in fact small businesses. So you're a business leader, they're a business. Like, so right there, got something in common. You want to retain and recruit. You want people to stay in this community. You want to bring new people to this community. You need childcare for that. And so how can we together reach our goals? We want more support for childcare providers who can provide more support for children, provide more support for families. You need more workers. You want them to be productive and stay in those jobs because that's economically efficient for you. And so let's kind of talk about our different goals. And then I think that the more we talk, the more that Venn diagram, has more and more overlap versus,
Mhm.
this idea that it's like, well, you got business and you got childcare. And it's like, and I know I just said this, but again, I'll say it over and over again. Like, childcare is a business.
Yeah.
Childcare is, not-for-profits, family childcare home providers, centers, chains, like that is a business. And so, I would say that kind of a little, not a trick, but something that I've seen used with great success is chambers pride themselves, as they should, with their power to convene and uplift. And so if you are a childcare provider, a childcare advocate, you're having a meeting, call your local chamber, call your local economic development council. Can we use your space? Would you like to sit in on this meeting? Because that is something that they've done before, that they're comfortable with. And then the headline is, this chamber host meeting talking about childcare, which has the benefit of being true, links the two, but also it's not asking them immediately to like sign up for something or to sort of use some of their cachet on an issue that they're still learning about. Now, obviously, ultimately, the hope is that that chamber will then, you don't really dip your toe into childcare, right? Like you wade in and then you wade in and then you wade in and pretty soon you're in it. I've talked to a bunch of folks who work at chambers that were not hired to be the sort of de facto childcare expert, but find themselves in that position.
Yeah.
And so just getting the ball rolling, finding that common ground, and then looking at ways that you can collaborate immediately and then building on that relationship.
Yeah. I think the point you're making about childcare providers being small businesses, I think often providers themselves don't necessarily see that. And so
Mhm.
maybe, maybe one of the interim steps or beginning steps is just encouraging those childcare providers to become chamber members, right? G-
100%. And
Yeah.
encouraging chambers, because I know that there are like dues and fees and things like that. But another thing that chambers have done effectively at both community and state levels is to proactively advocate for the lowering of overhead costs outside of the salaries for teachers. Obviously, childcare providers need to be paid more, and actually, in some states, they've figured out how to do that. But just like tax burdens, utilities, registering for business licenses, things like that. Like you still have to register for a license, but can there be an exemption for childcare providers? And so using that kind of business focused brain on the nuts and bolts of the childcare business is another way that sometimes those collaborations take form, where they're like, we need more childcare. It costs $2,000 just to apply for this business. Is there any way that we can lower that? So then that's less of a barrier for people entering that. But to your point, like, and this is why they're so good at their jobs, that childcare providers look at themselves as caregivers first, and then perhaps, business leaders second. And I, I always kind of laugh at this, but worked in an organization where we would take providers to the Hill in DC, and we would sort of like practice and we would prep, and they would often say, I love my job and here's what we need to do for the kids, and I would do this for free. And I would have to say, please don't say that to like, it is both
Wrongness.
admirable. Yeah, it is admirable. It is correct. This is the appropriations committee. They control all the money. Do not tell them you would do it for free.
Yeah.
And so kind of having that sort of um, lobbyist approach when talking about your interests is another area where I think those collaborations can be quite helpful, because it is a skill and it is an art, and childcare doesn't necessarily have its own sort of, like nobody hears about like big childcare, right? Like there's not like
Yeah.
there are some, but there aren't a ton of folks that are lobbyists specifically for childcare. And so in partnering with the business community, it's a win-win, because then you have these folks who are professional lobbyists, skilled relationship builders with policymakers, legislators, movers and shakers. You get them interested, prioritizing, and fluent in childcare, and now you have a foot in the door in those rooms.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
spending the morning, a part of the morning with us. And yeah, I'm sure we will be following up. This is going to be a priority of the council over the coming year or maybe multiple years. And so we'd love to stay in touch and talk about how we
Absolutely.
can move this work forward in Oregon.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
So, Council, I really wish he could have joined us in person because I have a feeling there were probably lots of questions people had for him. I will say he was more than willing to answer follow-up questions. So, if anything is coming up for you that you wanted to dig in further with, you can just close that loop with either me or Gabby. We can get more information from Aaron, or I don't know. He even offered to record a follow-up and question and answer for folks. So anyway, yeah, I was glad that we were at least able to get some of that perspective from him. Does anybody have any initial thoughts or feedback, things that they wanted to share from that piece before we move on to Oregon? Katie.
Yes. So, having been in that world for 9 years, I worked with the Chamber Foundation when we first started our program at the Bend Chamber, and it ended up growing into something that was pretty impressive with a lot of partnerships. One thing I will say is when we're thinking about that as a group on a statewide basis, one of the challenges, especially in Oregon, but this is true everywhere, is that not all chambers have the capacity to do this. A lot of the chambers in Oregon are actually visitors bureaus, and they're small. They can gather some folks, but they'll have limited resources to do something of this nature. But it's still something that's in a lot of people's on their radar screen statewide, and leveraging them as the conveners is always one of the first things you should probably do when you're trying to get business involvement, because at least they have their finger on the pulse better than anybody else does. So it was really fun.
Thanks for that feedback.
Mhm.
Other council members have things that came up or questions you'd like us to take back to Aaron and get answers? Robin.
Thank you. Thank you for putting that together. I found it really helpful. I feel like we've had so many conversations about how to engage business, and we just got really rich information. What we do with it now is a little bit of a question mark. And Katie, you know that world, and so I don't. Is there an Oregon coordinating chamber that is like the centralized chamber of chambers?
There are two. One is the Oregon Chamber of Commerce Association, and they basically organize the chambers, mostly focus on legislation. And then Oregon Business and Industries is the official state chamber organization. Both those entities are mostly focused on legislation, not groundwork necessarily. I think the best, and which is really important, but I think the best way to go about this when I was doing this work was just to do it locally and engage in that way. But I know that we've talked about it at OBI for several years. I know they have this on their radar screen to know it's important. It's just they're not a grassroots kind of an organization necessarily. They might be able to be talked into gathering a table, convening a table of some of the state's top employers, for example, to have this conversation. But definitely outside the legislative session.
Thank you.
Yep.
Peter.
Yeah, it was a great hearing his thoughts. I keep running against the brick wall, though, that I don't think this situation is solvable without the federal government. And it just, we keep going over and over and over again, and we can piece together small programs. And some people do remarkable things in their communities to piece together small programs, but unless there's enough pressure on the federal government to actually be a partner in this and accomplish it. We were close several years back to getting it done. And I guess if I had a question back is the Chamber Foundation part of discussions to develop a proposal for federal support for childcare nationwide?
That's great. We'll take it back to him and get you an answer. Other questions or feedback? If not, we're going to transition to a more Oregon lens. And as you guys know, during our retreat, we began discussions about business engagement and in childcare access, sort of what was happening now, what may happen in the future. And so I think throughout the year, as Gabby and I are planning future council meetings, we're trying to think about how to invite partners who are either doing this work or maybe could be doing this work in the future, both from the child advocacy side and from the business perspective, to really just help us understand this broader ecosystem and get a lay of the land. And so this month, we're starting with our trusted partners over at Children's Institute. I've asked Kali to join us. And so I'll turn it over to her to share what she sees as Children's Institute's role in this work, as well as any challenges or opportunities. And then we'll have time for some questions and answers with her. So welcome back to the council, Kali, since you've spent many, many years in this space.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces, so it's good to see you virtually. Liz and Gabby asked me to talk a little bit about business engagement, and just hearing the end of the video, some of what I have to say may be a little redundant, so just bear with me. Children's Institute, as I think all of you know, is an organization. We talk a lot right now about helping children be great by age 8. And so we do that through policy work, policy and advocacy work in early childhood, and then systems change work around training educators in preschool through 5th grade. And when I think about business engagement, it's something that I have been pondering since I've been at CI, which is about 4.5 years now. If I were to whittle it down into sort of 3 key things for business engagement, and again, some of this I heard on the video, but 1, a lead company matters, 2, chambers matter, which you heard a lot about, and 3, priorities matter. So I'll start with number 1 with the lead companies. Part of what I do in Oregon is trying to listen and go to different communities around the state. All of you know, this room represents the diversity of Oregon communities, and each community is different. I was recently talking with the county commissioner in one rural community who I asked about business engagement, and she shared how at one point in time, a large company brought other small businesses to the table. And as all of you know, Oregon is made up of a lot of small businesses. We don't have a lot of large Fortune 500 companies here. This community has a large, I don't want to name them, but has a large company that was convening businesses. And there was changes in leadership and that company stopped doing that. And she said, because of that, it kind of fell apart, the business engagement. And I said, why doesn't someone else just convene them? And she was sort of like, well, you need a company that people trust, that the businesses will come to the table. As a county commissioner, she wasn't, feeling like it was her role to bring business to the table. But in most communities, not all, maybe not even most, but many communities, what I have seen work is businesses bringing other businesses to the table. Who is a trusted business or employer within a region, and what is their appetite for early childhood and having conversations around it. As an advocate, we can't bring business to the table as business themselves can bring themselves to the table. And so businesses that have, again, respect, and it's often large employers, and so they're known because they are large employers, they're able to begin a conversation. And childcare was a focus because it impacted that community. And I know in talking with civic leaders and business leaders around Oregon, childcare is an issue that impacts many communities. And as we heard, chambers are not always in a position to be conveners. So figuring out if the large employer in a region could be a convener of other businesses is one strategy that has worked. Number two, my issue with chambers mattering. Katie spoke to this, and we see it in Boardman as well. I have been impressed where I have seen business galvanized around supporting young children, often the chamber is involved. So whether they are a convener or just a trusted ally that people will listen to, I see more often than not that chambers are a visible presence in the communities that have successfully convened people around early childhood care. And then I've also seen a lot of creativity with funding. I think the gentleman who was speaking said, it's not just about asking for money. And I think that's true. When you had Boardman was using enterprise owned dollars, using a public dollar in a creative way to subsidize childcare. And so obviously enterprise owned dollars are not available to many communities, but what are the creative financial private public partnerships that can be built that could help support childcare in a space? And so that blending of resources is important. And then the last thing two things around priorities matter. I think I've been struck when I have talked we've got two large entities that are sort of statewide entities convening businesses, and that is OBC and OBI. And I've met with their leadership multiple times, and along with members of my board meeting with them. And one of the things that I have heard is, yes, childcare matters, except it's just never the top two priorities that we have. And I appreciate the honesty and the directness in saying it. So my mind goes to, how do we make it one of the top priorities? Because they are not going to put in the energy to get their members to act on it until it is. I met with a colleague from Massachusetts who runs a similar organization in Massachusetts, and they have been successful in getting businesses to advocate. So her organization is Pure Policy Advocacy Org, and they had one loud champion, business leader who was also respected in the political space. We didn't even talk about, his connection to which party. That was irrelevant. It was the fact that this business leader was respected in political spaces, held a lot of sway, and he galvanized other businesses to join a roundtable. And that roundtable's job was advocacy, pure advocacy, not funding a whole initiative, but being a united voice of business around supporting early childhood care. And they were able to get legislation passed that funded more access, public access to preschool in the state of Massachusetts. So I asked her about taxes. Like, what we have found in our CI journey is that anytime taxes come up, and if it in any way touches a business, that all of their support and enthusiasm for early childhood dwindles, and they are anti the tax. And so, I asked her how she overcame that, and it's not a perfect puzzle. They were fortunate to have folks that understood it enough to get people to back down, to not be in stark opposition to some taxes. that's a challenge that I think we have in Oregon and have had and may continue to have. I do think we are in a position as a state that we have a huge revenue problem, and all of you know that. I know a few of you are in healthcare, and with HR1, it puts the healthcare entire ecosystem in crisis. And when you have millions, billions of dollars missing within a budget, it's not a time for business as usual. So I think the other thing we have been contemplating is how do we bring business to the table to come up with creative solutions that work for Oregon when it comes to revenue, and not just around childcare, but are the issues that matter most to Oregonians. I do think that childcare and early childhood is one of them. So whether businesses put them in the top priority or not, but there has to be a willingness for everyone to give a little for us to get anything from a revenue standpoint. And right now we don't have money. That's just, I don't have another way to say it. It's not there. So last thing I wanted to suggest, just because I heard it, Peter mention a federal solution, and there has been efforts at that, obviously earlier, before whatever the last presidential election was. There was some effort to look at childcare in a universal way. I think we're far from that now. However, there are models that some states have looked at that put a cap. I think what I hear from other states around the country, there's no market solution to the problem. And so I think what Peter is saying is correct. There has to be a public infusion of dollars, whether it's coming from the feds or from another source. That market solutions alone can't solve the problem. But there are policy solutions that states have looked at. Several states, Minnesota, Michigan, District of Columbia, have estimated the costs of quality care, and they are using different policy levers to figure out how, through public and private dollars, they can fund it. The New York Federal Reserve did a study recently that talked about the upstream impact of early investment. The Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago has done some research and outlining of the need. And so you do have some levers that I think are not like quasi-private public sector folks in finance looking at the financial implications of supporting childcare in a systemic way. But I think most would agree that it will take that public-private intervention with policy levers that are creative. It won't just be business community. However, I'll go back to where we started. I do think the business voice is important. The states that have gone far have included business voice.
It's good to see you this morning. Council, questions or thoughts that have come up in listening to Colleen's? I know you have them. Jump right in.
Well, I don't. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Ruby.
I don't really have a question. Cully and I have talked about these things a million times, probably to death. But I appreciate the candor of this is a reality of the situation, right? We need federal funds, echoing what Peter is saying too. I don't know how we dig ourselves out of this with well wishes and hopes of generosity from individuals or philanthropy. It's just not a hole that we can fix. And so, I don't have a solution. I don't know that anybody has really figured it out. But I appreciate that we can have a very frank and honest conversation about what this is, right? Because I've been saying this, and I think lots of folks here have said this multiple times. We can throw wonderful programs, we can throw supports, we can throw everything we want at it, but affordability for families and compensation for workers are the two things, and those things require money. So, more of a comment than a question or anything else, but I really appreciate us being able to have that honest conversation.
And I was just going to add, Kelly, thank you for taking on the roundtable role with the governors. support there, and I'm glad we're finally going to have a statewide discussion on this, and hopefully it'll inform enough of us to raise awareness that we need to, as a state, be united in our request to the federal government, and that hopefully other states will be doing the same thing, saying basically that this has to be addressed. It has to be addressed, and hopefully we can raise it up to that level of urgency that it needs. But thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Katie.
Thank you, Peter. I don't know how I feel yet. I'm kidding.
Katie.
It is so good to see you on this call. Welcome back, Khalid.
Good to see you.
I wanted to just put out there, but total agreement that this needs a funding solution. There's not a market solution. I think that nails it on the head. Is there a way, I wonder, that over time we position this as a public education bill effort initiative? There's so much to talk about healthy families and the need to get people back in the workforce. But one of the things you said, Khalid, really triggered this for me, is that there is a monetary and a societal benefit to looking at a human being as an actual human being that since the day they are born. And that there are implications of how that human moves forward in our society, and there's costs and benefits. And I know it's hard to look at it this way, but I've always thought that instead of putting Band-Aids on this thing, to reposition it as public education and a public investment approach. And I agree. I don't think this administration is ready to hear it. But in as much as we can encourage that kind of a conversation and see if it gets any traction statewide and outside of the state, seems to me like something might be too logical to actually work. But it seems like it's a no-brainer that the science is there. It's public education. It's educating a human from the very start, and tapping into that sort of funding rather than calling this something different. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think, I agree. And I would say the obvious challenge is what happened in California, which is, they extended public education to include preschool 4-year-olds and I think some 3-year-olds, and it put a lot of childcare providers out of business. And so I think the tension is, how do you create a mixed delivery system that doesn't just prioritize schools as the housekeepers of educating? Because when we say that, then the K-12 says, we got it, give us the money, we got it. And the fact of the matter is the data would suggest, and we don't have enough robust data, but children thrive more in these early learning settings than they do in the K-12 setting. And so I don't know that our schools are set up yet to help children in that way. And I think the diversity of our kids in ethnicity and language requires the diversity of the childcare settings that we have. Yeah. And so that's the tension that I see. And I think Oregon understands that. When I talk to folks, I don't know that I don't hear a lot of people saying, yeah, let's just give it all to K-12. And, I don't know that all of California said that either. I think you had a governor who just said, I'm doing this. And then there was a consequence. And there was a good article recently about that was sobering.
Yeah. That's a really good point. There's got to be a hybrid approach to it. Yeah. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot
to move that needle. But it's good to have you here, and good that you're doing it.
Thank you.
Zubin.
Hey, Khalid, always great to see you. I feel like you bring so much clarity, and that clarity brings comfort, and it's always great. So I want to start by saying I'm way out of my depth. And I'm applying thinking that may not apply, which is, when I go into classrooms and I'm working with teachers, there's this kind of first push of, can I inspire or illustrate an idea that's different from the way they're doing things? And if I can get past that point and they're with me, it's this delicate moment of, now they're going to try something new and they're going to do something new, and we have to support them, right? We have to coach, we have to, be in there with them, problem solve with them. I'm wondering if, because, during my time at CI, I know there were a lot of conversations happening with the business community, and, people were in it and trying to move forward. I wonder if, like, was there, do we see a retreat from business communities right now? Is that something we're seeing, or is my thinking not even making sense in this?
Well, your question of do I see a retreat?
Yeah.
I would say from CI, no, I don't think we're retreating. I know I certainly am not, and have included a couple more business folks on the board, as Peter Buckley, who is on our board, knows. And I lean into them because I have never worked in the private sector. I lean on people who have track record and respect in that sector to be voices, and they are, I would say, talking to other business leaders, and there is a catalytic effect to that. It's just not immediate. And some of the businesses that are larger businesses don't have the relationship with smaller businesses. And because Oregon is a small business community, I do think someone said it earlier, a localized strategy is important. I think Katie said this, and I would agree. And we can't be everywhere. So we intentionally have representation of business in different sort of geographical regions of the state. However, I have a business leader from Eastern Oregon, but all of you know Eastern Oregon is so huge. Malheur County, I mean, Liz knows this very well, is not Wallowa County. And even within Wallowa County, Joseph is not the town of Wallowa. And, there's so much diversity that just having the one leader, I do not think it solves all the problems of business voice. But this person, when I went to visit her, introduced me to the largest employers in that state, or in that part of the state. And many of them understood childcare, but like it wasn't, one of the guys who I think is the largest employer there and builds housing was like, oh, I don't really think about it. My wife like raised our kids, but just like having those introductions and being able to give materials and share some information is helpful. So I think it's a slow approach, but you don't build advocacy champions without relationship and understanding. And so that is what we do: build relationship and understanding, and find out who the champions are within a geographic space.
Other questions or thoughts that are coming up?
Wow, no more questions. Okay. I'm looking at Robin and Peg and Eric, Ruby, everyone on this call, I know.
Well, I'll speak up. I'll speak up because
Yeah.
I agree that, a federal solution to this is a ways off. And I think even a statewide solution is a ways off given our revenue challenges presently. I think what we have to do is be careful not to lose ground. That is to maintain momentum. And I think the way to do that is to build those relationships, continue that advocacy. And if we can find or get started with local projects that can be successful, that brings more people over to that advocacy side, and businesses see that, yes, that's successful. So maybe another community will buy into that. And I think while that's a slow, slogging journey, I think that may be what we're looking at for the time being.
Yeah.
Robin.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Thank you. I think, Kali, I was thinking about a lot of the things that have been shared so far this morning. And one of the curiosities that I have is when I think of you going around and speaking and listening to various businesses in different parts of the state, and this idea that Katie said we have to work in community to build this momentum. I was just trying to operationalize, how do we build champions? Is there a mechanism that actually creates champions with, like I was just reading the Aaron's reports that he talked about, the impact reports, and trying to see what they created for different states through the the person who shared earlier, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and thinking like with tools in hand and some mechanism for developing champions locally, and then of course having them connected broadly to a message. Like, what would it take for us to cultivate, support, and develop these business champions, local champions? And then I was thinking about when you talked about like a business, a lead business, and your three different components there, the lead companies. I thought, what would it take to even like help with it, either a visual of what it would look like. So you're a champion, you're a lead a business in your community. Here's what it could look like to support local businesses around the idea of childcare. So I was trying to workshop through in my head, like, how do you make a mechanize this? Like, how do you make this operationalize? That's probably a better word. So, but everything you shared and everything Aaron shared just has all of my wheels going. So I look forward to talking about it more. Thank you.
That's great. One thing I will say with this new council, I did reach out to the folks that are doing the Prosperity Council. One of the co-chairs I've known for a long time, Curtis. And so I reached out to have coffee with him. And the person that's staffing that, who's his director of government affairs, is someone I also have known for a while. And so I had a long conversation with her about how they're getting input from around the state, and they are working with Regional Solutions, and she recommended seeing how Regional Solutions could help, which is a state, entity, but they're supposed to be connected with different communities. And I also asked if there are ways that we can cross-purpose some of the tables that they're setting, because the Prosperity Council is definitely very much focused on business engagement. And so I do think there are paths to operationalizing. I think about that a lot as well, that are realistic based off of the capacity I and the CI team has. And so I think I appreciate your bringing that up, and I wonder how CI might partner with the council. I think, Liz, you're on this roundtable as well, and so there might be strategic ways that we partner, together and with Regional Solutions to be able to bring in more voice, and the Prosperity Council. And one of the requests I had was that I could have meetings, not regularly, but at least around a monthly basis or every other month with the Prosperity co-chairs, so that there is a tether, so that this early childhood roundtable is not happening over here, far separate from Prosperity. That doesn't make sense to me. So anyway, those are some thoughts that are percolating now.
Other questions or feedback?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ruby.
Just one more comment. I really appreciate Kali talking about how this is so relationship based, right? And finding those champions. And, in my work, I talk to business leaders as well. And the commonality that I found with people that have been willing to do this and been champions, it's just the nature, the philosophy behind their businesses or their personal values. And so the relational piece is really important, because we need to find those people that have those values already. We see it in their businesses, right? Why are you doing this? What about return on investment? Yes, those are important, but there are, some large employers that see this, lots of medium-sized employers that see this, lots of small businesses that see this, but can't really do anything about it. But it's really, I haven't been able to crack that nut and figure out how do we motivate these people? Because what I see is these are folks that already think about community in that way. They're not seeing just the ROI for their business, they're seeing the benefit for the entire community and connecting those dots about the downstream effects and how, childcare touches so many other spaces. So I think it's about finding those people, right? And I think Kali's really good at finding those people and talking to them and convincing them. And then they can talk to their colleagues and really sort of help shape their thinking around this because, I know I can talk to all the early childhood childcare people and we all align. I'm preaching to the choir. We know this, but we also know people like to talk to their peers, right? That have similar lived experiences as them. That goes across the board, not just, parents on the ground. It goes all the way. Business leaders, everybody really wants to hear from their peers. And so finding those people are really important, but that takes time. And I think Liz, you've been doing a good job of that. I think Kali, obviously you do a great job of that, but it takes time. And I don't think it's going to be overnight. And I don't think we can use data and research, but I don't know that that's the thing that motivates people. We've had 40, 50 years of data and research that really hasn't moved the needle with how businesses engage broadly in the childcare space. So I don't think there are easy answers. I really think it's about relationships. I think it's about an understanding. I think it's about sharing what it means more broadly and in the long term. Businesses often think, in the short term, and I've seen that conversation unfold in front of me with one large employer wanting to start a center that other employers could sort of buy into. And, first they needed millions of dollars to build the center. And then they had to think about what are the ongoing operating costs of it. And they couldn't wrap their brains around how they justify those expenses. So it's really like having the will to take the risk, to really think about what is a community benefit, how am I helping others? And, you're a business. You need to be in the black and make things happen for your shareholders or your owners. So I don't know. I just really want to appreciate the time that it takes to do this and to do it well. I don't think there are easy solutions. And there's lots of what did they call them yesterday? I was on a call with the Federal Reserve also. Compendiums, whatever they were calling, there's lots of materials out there for businesses to look at. And do we need 10,000 more of those things? No, I think we need to find them and talk about them and talk to people and be in relationship. Because the reports are there, right? The data is there. Like I've done those reports, right? Like what makes a good business? That was 10 years ago in a different state. And we still, we're still having the same conversation. So I think it's about depth in relationship. Mm-hmm.
Other questions or reflections to share?
Well, I'll just say, because I talk to businesses a lot.
Yeah.
And I think I'll just say it, that a challenge, particularly in this state, is the tax burden and the regulatory burden that businesses feel. We're ranked toward I think our best score on those two things is 47 out of 50. And tax burden is 49 out of 50. And these aren't small things. And I think that they are getting in the way of a lot of solutions that might be business driven, at least bankrolled by business. And it's the elephant that is in the room, even when they want to do good stuff around this. I'll tell you, it is real. And it's a tough one. I don't have the solution, and I'm not trying to I don't know, be a pessimist or point a finger at anybody, but it is a situation that we're dealing with. And I don't know how that gets into the vernacular as we talk about tackling this very human, very important challenge that we have in our state of getting our kiddos into stable communities at that age. And but I just feel like I had to say it because it's in every conversation I have. And so I guess that's it. I'll leave it at that.
I can just say one thing. I appreciate Katie bringing that up. And I think, I don't know how to say this very eloquently, but I am struck by, Oregon, I think, is unique in that there is strong anti-business sentiment from many people. And I personally, I see business as being part of an ecosystem, just like schools are part of the ecosystem, childcare is part of the ecosystem. Like businesses employ people, they employ families, families, many families. Again, Oregon is not a place that has like these huge, we're not Silicon Valley or anything close. And the few large businesses we had have downsized. So it's not like the big corporate giant is eating up resources in Oregon like you see in other states. And so given that they're small businesses, given that we have many like really small businesses, many minority owned businesses, like businesses are part of community. And for some reason, there is I think a false dichotomy and positioning of business versus community or businesses versus family. And I think we have to figure out a way to bridge that and help people. Again, I have never worked for a business in my life, but I just know like they're employers and they give living wages to people and they are helping people get out of poverty. I'm not gonna, there are a lot of different ideas around capitalism and all that. I'm not touching that. I'm just saying like we we need businesses to employ people so they can have living wage jobs, so they can support their families. And so they can't be the enemy. At the same time, business can't see community as the enemy, and businesses can't point to community as like a problem and they're not, they're being choked out. It's just such an us and them scenario that I think shouldn't be. We're all in this together. And if we can figure out a way to bridge towards the goal to help Oregonians thrive, I think we could come up with some solutions. But it's hard because I have so many friends in different seats around that table who, love this state, love their children. Many love other people's children too. You know what I mean? It's not like these are all selfish people. And yet in the larger atmosphere and the larger narrative, that they're not seen as connected. And so I do wonder, what is the messaging that builds a bridge and creates a new narrative?
I totally agree, Kali. I'd get on the Kali train.
If only I had a train.
Well, and I think your efforts to reach out, I'm excited that you're bridging that gap with the Prosperity Council, just because I do see the two are connected, right? We're talking about like, how do you support business? But foundationally, that's also about people who are running the businesses, who are working in the businesses, who are buying the services the businesses are providing. Like that ecosystem, I think by you doing the outreach that you're doing, I think is a great first start, so that we aren't siloed and thinking that childcare and prosperity are two separate things, right? They're actually the same. Other questions or feedback, reflections? It looks like we're questioned out. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a delight to see you and hear your thoughts. And yeah, we're all getting on your train now. So
it's a collective effort. It's a privilege to be here, and I really love seeing all of you. So hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kali.
Bye.
So Council, we are a little bit ahead of schedule. We are expecting Jonna to join us at 10:30. So I would like to just go ahead and get everyone a chance to have a quick stretch break and refill coffee. And let's plan on coming back just a little bit before 10:30 so that we can start promptly with Jonna and make sure we get the most of her time as we can. So see you all shortly. Morning, Jonna. We're just going to wait for council to come back and then we'll get started again.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Council members, if you could start coming back and either turning on your cameras or sending a chat to let us know you're here, but just off camera, and we can get started with Jonna. All right, it looks like we have most everyone back. I want to make the most of the time that we have with you, Jonna. So I think I'll go ahead and reconvene. It's 10:30. And the governor's office made some news yesterday in the childcare space. And so wanted to welcome Jonna Timms from the governor's office to talk to us about the governor's announcement and give the council an opportunity to ask any questions you might have about what to expect from the roundtable. Jonna, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Liz. Chair. Good morning, Early Learning Council. Again, my name is Jonna Timms. I am Governor's Education Initiatives Director, and appreciate you allowing me time this morning to let you know about some, as Chair Farouk Campbell said, news that we announced yesterday. So, just to give some background and context, back in December at the Business Summit that's sponsored by OBC, the governor announced that she was putting out the Prosperity Council. And that was economic and prosperity that would really look at, oh, I think we've got some background noise.
Watch that movie. I think that would be a good use of my
Sorry,
time.
give me one
Yeah.
second.
No problem.
Okay, I did manage to give you guys an agenda, which is what I want to hear from you. I have a couple.
There we go.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. No worries. Again, back in December at the Oregon Business Summit, Governor, during her announcement about the Economic Prosperity Council, also announced that she understood the connection and the need to, as we're talking about statewide economic prosperity, to talk about how our early learning system and specifically childcare contributes to our statewide economic prosperity. And so she made a bold call to action around bringing together both national and local experts to begin a conversation on what we as a state should be looking at as it relates to the services that we provide currently and strengthening those programs and the framework for our system, while we also start to look at how we could expand 0 to 3 childcare around the state, knowing that our business, our advocates, you all have told us what a gap that is around the state. And then as we are having those discussions, also looking towards the future and what that could mean for universal pre-K for our 3 and 4-year-olds in future biennia. So really having a blueprint or a roadmap towards that and having that be our North Star. So in the last, I would say about 8 weeks, we've been pulling together some folks to have conversations about what that might look like, and doing some recruiting of I'm really excited about some really talented and knowledgeable voices in this space, as I said, both nationally and around our state, and start bringing those folks together to then in a phased-in approach to give Governor both information to inform her overall vision and platform for early childhood and early learning moving forward, as well as recommendations for any legislative concepts we might need in 27 to put us in the right place and on the road to meet the challenge of expanding 0 to 3, as well as future universality across all 36 counties for our 3 and 4-year-olds, whatever that means. And so yesterday, we made an announcement that the roundtable will begin its work in March. We have 2 co-chairs, Kali Thorne-Ladd from the Children's Institute, and then Sarah Mickelson, who some of you may know, who was in Oregon for a while, but then in her last iteration was working in New Mexico as a past deputy secretary for early childhood. And so in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be hearing more around that. We will be announcing the rest of the membership. There'll be about 20 folks on the full member committee. You might know some of them. Some of them are in this room. And then also you'll be hearing more. We'll be communicating more about the things that the roundtable will be taking on in this first phase of work. And as I said, first phase, we're looking for that to be from March through about August, so that we would be able to codify some of the recommendations into some reporting directly to Governor that would then, as I said, inform her thinking on Governor's recommended budget, on any legislative concepts, or anything other recommendations needed in order to put us on the right road to that North Star. So I will take a deep breath. I'll stop here and see if you have any questions.
Questions or feedback for Jonna? Subin.
Sorry, this is I might have missed this. Do we have an idea of like time frame of how long the group will be working together?
Great question. Nice to see you, Subin. We are anticipating at this point it'll be about an 18-month commitment. As I said, looking at a phased-in approach, this first phase, March of 26 to about August of 26, will give the members a little bit of time to take a step back, us to reconvene, and then think about what we have learned and how that takes us into phase 2, which we anticipate starting in either December of 26 or January of 27. And then working all throughout 27 as we are preparing for these next steps in 28 and then in the long session of 29.
There are questions for Jonna.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for being here today. It's
Yeah.
really exciting to hear about this and to know that the governor has this so firmly in the radar screen. I was at the leadership summit and was one of the people clapping when she said it. What business representation do you plan on having, and just to bring that perspective as employers? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Nice to see you, Katie. So what we've tried to do as we were looking at membership for the whole committee is we have some national voices, but in Oregon, looking at both geographic representation as well as different parts of the system. So from the business perspective, we've got John Merriman, who has committed from Mount Bachelor. He's the CEO. He has experience in actually standing up childcare, both for his employees as well as for his guests on the mountain. And then John Tapania, who is the new CEO of OBC, will be joining us as well. John will be taking over at OBC in March, and so has committed to be on this journey with us as he starts his new role and have that sort of business association frame. So I would say those two voices are going to be really important. And the other thing I wanted to, I should probably share is we want suggestions from this council around best ways to get input from and engagement from other entities. Just because we have this roundtable, we need voices to influence and to provide information to the roundtable, who then is working through some of those the strategies and, again, recommendations that will be put forward. But would really appreciate your support and your involvement in how best to do that. I will be working with Liz and Gabby and Alyssa about how to make sure that you all as a council consistently have information back to you so that we have a consistent feedback loop. Thanks for the question, Katie.
Other questions? Robin, did you have one earlier? Or did it get asked?
It's just more of a comment that I appreciate the intentionality of connecting this with the Prosperity Council and the thought that's being put into how this is connected and works together in tandem. So I look forward to seeing what happens.
Thanks, Robin. Nice to see you. Yeah, that was very intentional. And so one of the things that's happening on in the governor's office side is I'm meeting pretty consistently with the folks who are staffing that. So Sarah Means, who is my colleague in the governor's office, as well as the prosperity officer, Tim Knop. And then also they have folks from the Port of Portland who are staffing that council. So we are working right now to put together a plan for how either the committee, the roundtable as a whole, or a subgroup or co-chairs from the early from our roundtable have some sightline and some connection to the Prosperity Council. So we'll be working towards that in the future.
Wonderful. We have just a few more minutes. Any other questions or reflections to share with Jonna?
Well, as I said, I think you will, as we go into the next week or so, actually about the first part of March, you'll be hearing more about the committee as a whole. I think you'll be not surprised that there are a few folks who are in this room who will be part of that. I hope I'm allowed to say, but I don't want to out you. Liz, can I say?
That's fine.
Okay, all right. So Liz is going to be participating with us. Carrie will be participating. Obviously, Robin will be participating. We have some great national folks. One you may know, Harriet Dichter will be part of that as well. So we have some. I feel like we've got some great voices that bring a multitude of perspective, and also will help really guide this work. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Wonderful.
Okay.
We're excited to see how it goes.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much for allowing me to come today, and I will be back. I'll be back shortly with more information.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for spending part of the morning with us.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye. Okay, we are going to transition now into an Every Child Belongs update. Gabby, can you introduce or tell us who from DELC is going to be giving us the
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we have a really great group here, Council. We have Lindsay Baltus, Katrina Miller, and then some folks from ODE as well, Cara Williams. So I will pass it to them to also just take a second to introduce themselves as well. And yeah, go ahead, Lindsay, take it away.
Thanks, Gabby. Good morning, Council. My name is Lindsay Baltus, and I'm the Every Child Belongs Manager at DELC, which is a new position that sits within DELC's Professional Learning System office. So I've been in this role since December of last year, and I'm happy to be presenting to you all for the first time. And I'll be sharing this presentation with my colleague, Katrina Miller. Well, I'll pass it to you, to Katrina, to introduce yourself.
Good morning, Council. It's great to be with all of you again. I'm Katrina Miller, Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Specialist with the Every Child Belongs initiative.
And then, Cara, did you want to say hello?
Thank you, Lindsay. My name is Cara Williams. I am the Director of Inclusive Services at the Department of Education. And with me is my colleague Meredith Valines, who is our ECSE Systems Coordinator at the department.
Great, thanks. And we also have John Reeves and Aaron Kanabe Winterstrom, who will be here to, answer questions from you all as needed. But I can jump into our presentation. John, if you can pull our slides up. And we can go to the next one. So the purpose of our update today is just to share an overview, high level, of where we are with Every Child Belongs, what our objectives and strategies are, and some of the things we've accomplished as well as the work ahead. We realized that it's been nearly a year since we presented to the Council on Every Child Belongs, and a lot has happened in that year. So we're excited to share progress and what's to come. We can go to the next slide. So just some background to ground us. Every Child Belongs is DELC's Early Childhood Suspension and Expulsion Prevention Initiative, which was established through House Bill 2166. That legislation was passed alongside Senate Bill 236, which prohibits the use of suspension or expulsion in licensed and DELC-funded early learning and childcare programs. We know that suspension and expulsion in early learning and care settings negatively impacts kids and families, and children of color and children experiencing disabilities are disproportionately impacted. So the law and DELC's implementation strategies are designed to promote inclusive environments for all children, and particularly those belonging to groups that have experienced this impact. And on the next few slides, we'll share more about our strategies for implementing this initiative. So we can go to the next one. So the overall goal of Every Child Belongs is to reduce suspension and expulsion rates and disparities in early learning and care programs in Oregon. And this slide just shows our strategic framework a little bit about how we're going about this. So we have four main objectives. The first is to increase the knowledge and skills of the early learning and care workforce through expanded training and technical assistance for early learning professionals and childcare providers. We also want to improve access to supports for programs where there may be children at risk of suspension and expulsion, such as infant and early childhood mental health consultation, which Katrina will share more about in a bit. We need to collect data to see who we're serving, how the system is working, and what difference the services are making. And we have some data today that we'll share with you, as well as plans for additional research in the future. And aligning policies and coordinating systems is a key strategic objective for Every Child Belongs. And that's because we know that although the legislation establishing Every Child Belongs was written very broadly, DELC's resources alone are not going to be enough to support all the needs of providers and families. So really moving the needle on suspension and expulsion prevention is going to require cross-system partnership. And so we're looking at how we can work together with our system partners to really align on our shared goals. And we'll also talk a little bit more about our vision for that later in the presentation. And now I'm going to hand it over to Katrina to share more about some of these strategies and what we're learning as we roll them out.
Thanks, Lindsay. And John, let's go to the next slide. So Lindsay mentioned that workforce development is a key part of the initiative and part of what is called for in the legislation. And our workforce development partners are our existing childcare resource and referral partners. They have been providing a lot of this for many years. And we're just looking at how do we increase the inventory of options and the variety of options, things that are specifically targeted towards preventing suspension and expulsion. They are also the staff of CCR&Rs. The technical assistance providers are also responding to support requests that come in through ECB Connect. Let's go to the next slide. So one of those other key components is infant and early childhood mental health consultation, which is an evidence-based strategy for preventing suspension and expulsion. And it kind of helps create that continuum from training and technical assistance or targeted technical assistance to mental health consultation across the different levels of need. And so this is a new workforce across the state of Oregon and is very exciting to see the development happening and services beginning, or not just beginning. In some cases, they're just beginning, but some of them have been active for 6 months already. Next slide, please. So this one is ECB Connect, or Every Child Belongs Connect. And this is, our goal was to create a system that is a simple way for educators to request support. So, and that it can be, they don't have to find time during their open hours to submit a request. They can go online at 10 p.m. if they want to and submit a request. And then they will get, and in that request, they can specify what is a good time for them to receive a call back. So then they get a call back. And there was a lot of work that went into building this system, a lot of technical work, as well as a lot of engagement with partners on what the system should look like, what questions should be asked, all of those things. But it is now, we've done phase 1 and phase 2 rollout, with phase 3 coming shortly. More on that in another slide. Okay, next slide, please. So we wanted to take a moment just to talk about the function of ECB Connect. It is, so the purpose is, as I mentioned on the last slide, is to provide that simple way for educators to request support when they're facing a challenging situation that could lead to suspension or expulsion. Now, we're defining that fairly broadly. We want educators to request support well before the child's expulsion is imminent. So everyone who submits a form will receive a response. And in most cases, that response will be within 1 to 2 business days. I know that many of the regional service providers try to get a call made back to that provider the same day. Some responders or some requesters will be directed towards technical assistance from the CCR&R staff. Some requesters will be directed towards mental health consultation, and some may be referred to other services. For example, there was a provider who was trying to locate the food services program, and that provider was helped to find that information. ECB services are provider focused or educator focused rather than family focused, not to the exclusion of families, but specifically focused on providers. And so therefore, ECB Connect is primarily designed for use by providers who are seeking support. It does allow a parent or a professional to submit a request for support on behalf of their child's educator. Let's go to the next slide and talk about what ECB Connect is not. So it is not a new way to submit an EI or ECSE referral, early intervention, early childhood special education. It is also not the only way to request technical assistance. If a educator is looking to join a focused childcare network, they can still just call their childcare resource and referral. And it's also not intended as a guide for parents on accessing behavioral health services, either for themselves or for their child. If somebody makes a request with any one of these things, they will still receive a response, but then they will be helped to find the resource that is what is the better fit for them. And the next slide. So this one is a process map that kind of identifies what is the flow. However, it's important to know this is not a timeline. So these different sections take differing amounts of time. So steps 1 and 2 may take 24 to 48 hours, where step 5 may last multiple months or even a year. So it's not a timeline, but it does show you the process of ECB Connect. Let's go to the next one. This is what our phased rollout map looks like. So the blue section were the first 3 pilot regions in the testing phase number 1, and they started last July 31st. Then the green sections are phase 2, and they started, I think it was November 21st. It was just before Thanksgiving. And then the kind of salmon color is phase 3, which will go live. We've already begun training, but the ECB Connect system will go live on March 13th. So we're very close. Next one, please. So we were talking recently with Karen Prow, who is a childcare resource and referral director at Neighbor Impact in Central Oregon. She also holds the Regional Service Provider Grant, and so her team includes both the technical assistance staff and the infant and early childhood mental health consultant. And she shared these words. She said, "We're doing something with this project that educators have been waiting for years. We've finally stepped up, and that's really important. That includes the mental health consultation, the process for seeking support, and all of it. We've finally stepped up, but this is just the beginning. We're only meeting a portion of the need, maybe a quarter of the need that's out there." So we just wanted to share those words from Karen. Okay, so let's dive into a quick look at some of our data. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. But on the left, you can see the number of support requests we have received each month. And this data was updated. This is slightly different than what was in your packet. This is data that was pulled this morning. So it's up to the minute. Well, not quite up to the minute, up to the hour recent. You can also see over on the right side the number of requests or the percentage of requests coming from center-based programs compared to family childcare. And center-based programs are making more requests for support. They also serve a larger number of children, but this is something that we'll watch over time. Next slide, please. The geographic distribution. So up at the top of the screen, you'll see Central, Marion-Poke, Yamhill, and Washington. Those are the first 3 regions that launched. They have a different population density across each of the 3 regions, and that is reflected in the number of requests. So Central has a less population density of early learning programs compared to the other 2, and they have fewer requests. You can also see that same thing playing out in phase 2, where the Clackamas County and Lane County have received more requests than some of the others so far. But we've received a total of 193 support requests to date. And actually, just this moment, I saw a new request come in, so it's at least 194. Let's go to the next slide. One of the questions we're asking is, what is the likelihood of expulsion? How likely is this child to be expelled in the next week? And the majority are saying it is unlikely or very unlikely. And that does reflect what we're seeing, that people are asking for, the majority of educators are asking for support before that child is at imminent risk. They may have concerns, there may be a chaotic classroom, but they're not imminently thinking this child needs to leave. However, there are situations where it is very likely, and in fact, situations where the child has been expelled by the time the initial contact is made back to the provider or by the time the consultant gets out to the program. So it is happening. We ask the provider, the educator, to rate their level of concern from almost none to critical, and we don't define what this is, but you'll see the majority are coming in at major with some at critical. Next slide. We're also asking, what is the age of the child about which they are making the request? And this dark blue section here are 4-year-olds. So 35% of requests coming in, a 4-year-old is behind the request, followed by 26% are 3-year-olds. But notice that we also have some here of children that are under the age of 1. Not quite sure. We have here 12% was not collected. I'm not quite sure why we have that, but it's not unexpected that we would have some gaps in our data. So we're looking further into that. Support requests, in terms of once they go through the kind of interview, which we call a welcome consultation, which pathway are they sent down? 19% technical assistance, 44% infant and early childhood mental health consultation. And then you'll see these other categories which are deferred. In some cases, this is because the regional person making the response back can't get a hold of the provider. 13% are closed at screening. This includes some that came in, they were requests that were made from a region that was not yet part of the ECB Connect rollout. We made sure that they were connected to services, but we didn't count them in this data. And then there's 22% that are not yet assigned. And there's a little bit of that is data cleanup that needs to happen. And that also reflects that there can just simply be a delay between when that initial interview happens and when the case gets assigned to someone. So we're tracking that. Next slide, please. And I'm tossing it back to Lindsay here.
Thanks, Katrina. So one of the questions we're asking is whether the child that the provider is requesting support with is already receiving any special services. So you can see that according to this preliminary data, 28% of children that providers report needing some help with are already receiving special services, and we have those services and supports listed out on the right. I will just let you know that we're making some new updates to our system for the coming phase of our rollout, and we're planning to gather data on whether a child is receiving behavioral health services. We're also working on disaggregating that other category as well to understand what services are there. So more to come in those areas. But of that 28%, we're seeing that it looks like 51%, as of our most recent data, are receiving early intervention, early childhood special education services. And that amount of crossover for us just really emphasizes that we need to be developing some shared strategies with Oregon Department of Education, and we are. So DELC, ODE, as well as Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Infant Mental Health Association already collaborate through the Oregon Early Childhood Inclusion Initiative, which focuses on implementing preventative strategies such as the pyramid model and indicators of high quality inclusion. And recently, we've also been digging in a little bit deeper with our ODE partners to identify what are some specific cross-system strategies we can work on together to prevent suspension and expulsion, and what are our short-term strategies and what might be some longer-term strategies. So some of the things we're beginning to explore now are coordinating our referral systems, understanding gaps in training and how we might fill or bridge those gaps, looking together at suspension and expulsion policies across the early childhood system and developing some recommendations for alignment based on our shared goals, and doing shared or coordinated and community engagement. So we're still in the beginning stages of this work, but it's a priority for Every Child Belongs in the coming year, and we're looking forward to seeing what's possible. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kara Williams to just share a little bit more about collaboration with EIECSE.
Thank you, Lindsay. Again, my name is Kara Williams, and I'm the Director of Inclusive Services at the Department of Education. And I'm also joined by my colleague Meredith Valines, who is an EIECSE Systems Coordinator. We really appreciate the opportunity to highlight how partnership between the Department of Education and the Department of Early Learning and Care is really essential for Every Child Belongs to move forward. Oregon's EI, Early Intervention, and ECSE, Early Childhood Special Education system implements the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and is responsible for ensuring that their youngest children with disabilities have access to special education services statewide, always in partnership with those families and other adults who support them. The IDEA requires us to consult with and train parents and caregivers, and in preschool that also extends to the educators and the early learning staff. Strong teaming across these systems ensures that children experience a shared and coordinated plan for learning and participation. Next slide, please. Thank you. As stated earlier, Every Child Belongs does not replace the EI-ECSE referral process. These referrals and screenings are part of the central role of the state and district to ensure that children with disabilities are identified as early as possible for early intervention and special education. The sources of these referrals come from various partners across the early learning system that include early childhood programs, pediatricians, and families. Collaboration and coordination is essential so that we don't disrupt, interfere, or delay access to services for any child that might require them. Next slide. Thank you. As enrollment in early learning programs shows and grows, so does the number of young children identified as eligible for special education. With increased public investment in early care and education, we are continuing to see increasing numbers of children identified through those settings and accessing EI or ECSE services. This creates an opportunity for the Department of Early Learning and Care and the Oregon Department of Education to strengthen our child find and align workforce supports across the agencies. Some of our efforts like Raise Up Oregon and our Part C State Systemic Improvement Plan have already laid a strong foundation for that shared work. Next slide, thank you. Oregon State Systemic Improvement Plan has focused since 2015 on improving outcomes for young children with disabilities ages birth to 5. Over time, and in partnership with the State Interagency Coordinating Council and other partners, it's evolved to emphasize cross-agency infrastructure and the use of evidence-based practices to build system and workforce capacity. What began in ECSE classrooms and programs has expanded to include families in home and community settings, as well as providers across early learning environments. This work is reflected in our Oregon Early Childhood Inclusion Initiative that Lindsay mentioned earlier. It's a cross-agency effort to prevent the disproportionate exclusion of young children with disabilities through inclusive frameworks, trauma-informed practices, and equitable access to curriculum. This infographic here reflects our most recent annual performance report for the federal fiscal year 2024, and we have milestones projected into 25-26. We can see a really strong alignment between this work and the vision of Every Child Belongs. Shared purpose and shared investment have moved us forward, and there's still more for us to build together. As was noted previously, aligning policies and coordinating systems is going to be a key strategic objective for Every Child Belongs, and we are here to support this aim. The legislation established Every Child Belongs was written very broadly, and neither the Department of Learning and Care nor Oregon Department of Education resources alone are going to be enough to support the needs of all of the providers and families. We really need to move the needle on suspension and expulsion prevention, which is going to require some really strong cross-system partnership. So we're looking at how we can work together with our system partners to align our shared goals, guidance, and activities. And I will turn it back to Lindsay and Katrina to take us through some of the next steps.
Thanks, Kara. So this slide shows some of the upcoming milestones that we're planning for evaluating Every Child Belongs. So we are still at the beginning of gathering data to understand how our ECB Connect system is working and who we're serving. And we're already using that preliminary operational data that Katrina shared, as well as feedback from our regional partners who we're engaging with regularly to make improvements to our system and ensure it's working for the people who are using it. Of course, our ultimate goal is to have data that will allow us to understand whether the services we're still in the process of rolling out are working to keep children in care. But before we can gather that data effectively, we need to make sure our system is up and running and working to get those services out to providers. So once ECB Connect and related services are available statewide and we know providers are receiving them, we'll be in a better position to begin understanding some impact. And we're currently in the process of engaging an external evaluator for a preliminary impact evaluation, and we expect to be able to report some findings by winter of 2027. Understanding the full impact of Every Child Belongs will take time, so this is only the beginning of our longer-term research and evaluation approach for Every Child Belongs, but we expect that this preliminary impact evaluation will help inform future research questions. We can go to the next slide. This is a little bit more information about policy and program alignment. This group heard an update last month on the rules that are being developed for licensed providers, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to highlight that rulemaking is one piece of the policy alignment work we need to do, which also includes clarifying eligibility and requirements for programs that are license exempt and programs that receive public funding, and that work is underway. And we can go to the next slide. And this group also saw this timeline last month. And what I really just want to emphasize for council is that the timelines for the rulemaking process that's being led by CCLD and the rollout of services that our team is leading are coordinated and aligned. And then one more slide. This shows some information about our communications and partner engagement approach. And there's a lot of information on this slide, so I won't spend a ton of time walking through all these points. But what I really want to emphasize is that clear, timely communication, as well as intentional partner engagement, are really important strategies for Every Child Belongs. And our communications and partner engagement plan is meant to ensure that those who may be impacted by decisions that we're making have accurate information and opportunities to help shape the work. And that is all we have for today. So thank you, and looking forward to taking some questions and discussion.
Questions or reflections for the group? Peter.
Well, first, thank you. This is very promising. It's great to see how it's being put together so we'd be able to collect the data in this manner. I guess the question I have is part of the survey that you're doing, does include provider voices? Are we going to get data back from providers in terms of satisfaction for access, satisfaction for outcomes, et cetera?
Yes, that's part of our upcoming preliminary impact evaluation plan, is being able to do some focus groups or surveys with providers to understand how the services are working for them. And like I mentioned, it'll really depend. We have to make sure that we're actually effectively getting those services out to providers first. But once we have our operational data that shows that our system is working to do that, then we'll really be able to dig in and start getting some of that data from providers.
Excellent. And Lindsay, is there, and this is very, very early, but do you get a sense at all in terms of capacity? Have we built enough basically infant and early childhood mental health consultant capacity to meet the need? Do you have an initial thought on that?
Katrina, I wonder if you want to take that one. Yep.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think the answer is no. We have the initial capacity to sort of begin. But I think going back to Karen Prow's comment is that she's saying we're meeting a quarter of the need. And I think that our regional leaders across the state would agree with her statement.
Great, thank you.
Katie.
Thanks. I have two questions. Who is the external evaluator? What expertise, where do we look for somebody like that? That's the first question. Go ahead.
We don't have an external evaluator engaged quite yet, and we'll be able to share more information when we have more, but we're still in the process for sort of planning around that.
Okay. The second question kind of parlays off of what Peter just brought up. Will there be a look at how effective these counselors or folks who are offering support for the providers versus, I'm just have in my head some very important public testimony we had this morning. What is the difference between getting good advice and good supports versus what is a shortage of that can't be solved without actual additional personnel and assistance? I worry about that, about how much we're asking these providers to do. And I know we don't all have solutions for it, but will there be a look at what the ratio is of adults to kiddos and those challenges? And I know there's a funding issue next to that versus having well-trained people.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Katie, and I think that's something we can certainly take into consideration as we're continuing to engage and understand from providers what's most effective in supporting them in their classrooms.
Robin.
Thank you for presenting. I'm just reflecting back on how many conversations over the years that we've had about this, and I'm so grateful that the work started when it did, to get where we are today. And then hearing the public testimony, hearing from community that kids are struggling now more than ever, like we couldn't have even maybe predicted 3 years ago what the need might be. So I'm both grateful for the momentum that has happened. I'm really grateful to see ODE working with DELC and OHA, and the inclusive table seems like it was also perfectly timed to help to inform this process. So I could get down lots of rabbit holes about how ECSE is working with this and was really glad to see that reflected in some of the data. To Katie's point about public testimony and what we hear in the community is even with training, even with consultation, we're so much further ahead than we were. If we've got a need that is like more people in the room and we cannot solve that right now with finances, I guess what I don't want to assume is that any one agency can solve that or even imagine the solution on their own. And I just wonder, is that at the inclusive table that they're thinking broadly, or like zooming up? Is it more the leaders of our agencies that are thinking about that? Where are parents' voices in this? Anyway, I'm sort of saying it's all great. And oh my gosh, I feel overwhelmed for all of you trying to solve this and worried about our workforce. I'm worried about our parents. I was talking to a provider in Douglas County who said that she knew of people who were trying to maybe move kids along before this deadline came up because they wouldn't be able to do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was worried about providers maybe closing their doors ahead of time and worried, but this is another worry. So bringing up challenges I know isn't helpful, but I would just love to hear how some of you are reflecting about that. And is there anything that council can do or any one of us that can help support what I think is a really complex issue with not a super easy solution? So thank you for listening.
Robin, I wonder if I can start by addressing just one small part of what you said. And like I agree with what you have and other council members have laid out. It's a very complex landscape, and there's multiple factors that go into causing suspension and expulsion. So the classroom context, the size of the group, the ratios, we know that those can impact suspension and expulsion. Those are, as you know, really large system investments. It would take really large system investments to change that. Does that need to be looked at? I mean, I think that's for maybe the council to answer, but there are a variety of needs. But one piece that I specifically wanted to say is we are not going into this with the assumption that every child will remain in their exact same placement. So there may be situations where whatever the situation is, that child's situation is not a good match with that provider's situation at this time. Maybe the provider has skill building to do. Maybe the child has particular needs that just can't be met in that environment. And so we're working on like, what does a planned transition look like so that the family is not just told to not come back on Monday, but that there is sort of that warm handoff to a new place. So I guess I just want to say there is that acknowledgement that children will move to new places. But hopefully we can provide support to the child and child's family and the provider in that process.
Eric.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation. It was really good to hear about the work that's happening and the coordination. I think that's one of our biggest issues across the board in a lot of things is coordination of effort. A lot of people doing yeoman's work, but not connected and getting the bang for the buck we can. I think, I spent a lot of time dealing on the intersection of health and education, whether it was the Upstream Initiative or the old Health and Education Collaborative or the Roundtable, all these things. And so I know that the healthcare systems and CCOs and community benefit organizations have organized across the state to use Connect Oregon as sort of a referral system, which sounds a little bit like sort of what you're doing here. So I'm wondering, one, is there any connection or discussion with those kinds of systems to really link the healthcare system into this, particularly if behavioral health issues are a big part of some of the things we're doing? Particularly talk about capacity, right? Identify more capacity. And then I see that OHA is one of the partners, but are the CCOs in the mix at all in any of this that you know of?
I think the mention of referral systems is a good one. And, that's some of the work that I mentioned that we're doing with our department, our partners at Department of Education. And so would be interested to think about, again, like our ECB Connect system as just one piece, but how we can make sure that we're coordinated so that we're lightening the load as much as possible. And then I don't know, John, if you want to speak any more to the collaboration with the health authority and what's been happening there.
Yeah, hi all. I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm John Reeves. I'm the Professional Learning System Director here at DELC. We have had and have been having some conversations with the Oregon Health Authority around and connecting around coordinated care organizations and social emotional work, and also thinking about how can we gather some of the success stories that are happening in local regions and try to think about how we would replicate some of those things so we can expand some of the best practices throughout the state as it relates to behavioral care systems and early childhood. But again, it's still moving toward some specific strategies. But I think if we can quantify some of those areas where local regional partners have had some success with those kind of more community-based initiatives, we can start to think about how we can move that forward in other areas. I think there was another part to your question that I was going to answer, but it'll come to me later. But thank you.
Peg, you're muted.
Sorry. Thanks for the clear presentation, and I appreciate the gathering of data from the first couple of phases. It's not surprising to me that 51% of the referrals are kids that are already involved with EI, ECSE. And I guess I'm wondering, is there a way we can be proactive because we know those kids? And if we can find out about, where they go to childcare, could we do some extra training proactively with those providers to maybe lessen the burden on the providers and as well as the family? And I guess my other question is, I think a lot of early childhood education programs have kind of gotten around suspension by shortening days or doing altered care and putting the burden kind of back on the parents. And I'm wondering if we're keeping track of those things, because I think that's equally important.
Peg, thank you for that. If I can respond to your question about providing additional support for children who are in early intervention or early childhood special education, I really appreciate that question, and I think that reiterates the importance of this kind of collaboration between the Department of Education and the Department of Early Learning and Care. One of the things that we know that simply increasing staffing in a classroom is not necessarily always the answer, or in a setting is not necessarily always the answer, but exactly as you mentioned, we need to really push in with some support for meaningful planning and reflection, on some job training and on some technical assistance, and also some supports for effective teaming. So it's really how do we create opportunities for adults to really learn how to increase access and independence for children in the classroom and how to support children in the classroom. So that's one of the things that Oregon Early Childhood Inclusion is really looking to do, is how do we provide those supports to those providers in a way that feels responsive to their needs, and in a way that also feels responsive to the environment in which they are functioning, whether that be a child care or a preschool setting. We really want to make sure that those adults have what they need in order to ensure that we have high quality inclusive environments for all kids.
I heard the second part of your question, it sounded like was about, I think what we would call maybe soft expulsion. I don't know, Katrina, if you want to speak to what we're hearing or how we're thinking about those types of situations, or yeah, supporting providers.
Yeah, soft expulsion is something that is not as well understood as expulsion itself. But soft expulsion is where a provider um, or the program may change aspects of something about what the child's access to the early learning environment that makes it so that the situation no longer works for the family. So, for example, requiring that a parent come and pick up, actually be in the classroom with the child. If a parent is employed, they may need childcare for that child so that they can work. And so therefore they can't also be in their child's classroom at the same time. And that may cause the family to need to withdraw the child. Or the same thing applies with if a child has trouble at nap time. Sometimes children are asked, or families are asked to pick their child up before nap time. But again, that creates the same challenge. And so the provider can end up feeling like they are they're not expelling the child. They haven't actively told the family that they need to leave, but the circumstances that are created are such that then the family withdraws. Um, yeah, I'm sorry if there was something more, if there's a particular question that would be
I guess
helpful.
I want to know if we're keeping some data about that, because I think that's an important part of the success of this program.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think that would be, I think we'll learn more as we go along and as we dig deeper into our evaluation plan about what's the best way for us to capture that. And what it might be is, it might be that the a consultant starts working with the program and they find out that the child is that these circumstances are going on and the family withdraws the child. So that would be one way that we could get the data. Another way is, although ECB Connect is intended to be a provider facing service, if a parent contacts us and says, my child is being sent home every day, then we want to know that that's happening. So because that is a potential expulsion, and then allows us to find a way to respond and hopefully change the circumstances. So I think we'll find ways, but it is definitely one that is harder to track. But yeah, it is one of the reasons that we built in an option for parents to submit a request to ECB Connect.
And if
Thanks.
I can just add to what Katrina said, that this is, again, why it's so important that in this moment, ODE and DELC are actively engaged with one another and aligned, not just in prevention activities, but also in data collection. And so there will be more to come, I think, as the program evolves and grows. And that collaboration is strengthened.
Subin.
Hi, this is kind of a comment that touches on a lot of the questions that were raised and some of the responses that I think DELC and ODE are providing. So part of it is like an update on the advisory committee part of the Every Child Belongs, is that the advisory committee is about to expand. There's about to be a pretty big growth in terms of the number of people represented. That will include some of our mental health consultants, more regional service providers, families, right? And Orimha is kind of taking the lead. Hi, Erin, you didn't get to introduce yourself earlier, but yeah. So and in those advisory committee meetings is where a lot of these tangly, thorny, complicated, complex questions, that's where we grapple with them, right? And it's not, we don't always land on perfect solutions every time, but those discussions are happening. Everything that we've talked about here are things that have come up in that group in some form or another. And so So this touches on some of the things that have been raised thus far. So we've talked about, for example, like how do we get these kind of different systems to connect, right? So it's not just agencies, but it's also like CCOs already kind of have thought about how to create a single point of entry and, you know, enrollment and things like that. And then we have the Delk kind of figuring that out. And I remember 2 retreats ago, Robin and I sitting at a table, and Robin's drawing this really great graphic of how all these systems can eventually connect and work together. And I think that vision is something we should really hold on to. But something I've recognized over the last few meetings is like, first, the obvious thing is there's not enough resource to put in that big vision that I think we all want, right? That we all can see is like this one big system that families, providers, they can all just kind of go to this one thing and it's just one thing, right? I think we all want that, and it's not resourced in that way, and the bill isn't written in that way, and that's not what the bill is asking us to do, right? And so that's kind of one thing. And then around the personnel, I think Kara really answered this really well, which is like, yes, sometimes the answer is more adult human bodies. I think that happens in a lot of cases, actually. And sometimes it's about teaming and how we kind of organize staff. But that's still a resource issue, right? Because you need people to plan and they need to have time. A lot of providers don't even have time outside of their classroom to plan and meet and be adults together, right? And so these are the kinds of things that the advisory committee talks about, wonders about, tries to problem solve. So just wanted to respond.
Marie.
Thank you. I had 2 questions. The first one was I just wanted to ensure we've received some what I would consider really thoughtful and important public comment on this topic. And I just wanted to ensure that everybody here presenting today has seen that, reviewed that, read it. Maybe it's been a part of your conversations. So thank you. And then the second is I was wondering, I'm on slide, I'm not sure which number, but you have this flow chart 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I just wondered at some point, will you be able to communicate with providers some sort of time frame expectation so they know when they're going to be expecting to hear from someone so they're not floating in, oh my gosh, help me land for an indiscriminate amount of time?
Yes, thank you. That's a great call out. It is when a provider submits an ECB Connect request, they get an automated response that says that someone will follow up with them, generally within 1 to 2 days. So there is, like, once they get that, they have a concrete notification of like, okay, somebody's going to reach out. But I also take your point more broadly of just incorporating that into our general communication strategies.
And I guess too, Subin, maybe this is for you, but your committee, I know that you're on, I just want to make sure they're seeing the public comment that we're receiving around this topic so that those things can be baked into that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I brought it up as like I commented about the comments in the last meeting, but we can actually, I think, Aaron, I'm looking at Aaron. Yeah, we can definitely put that on the agenda.
Other questions or reflections? One question I had just quickly is, there's a lot of providers out there. Obviously, there are some who are learning about that this resource is here. I'm wondering sort of how you guys are thinking about ongoing communication to existing providers and new providers that are coming online about both that they need to not be suspending and expulsion is going to be banned, but also like what resources are out there. What's your sort of communication strategy moving forward to make sure the providers know that you're here and up and running?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We've been working with CCLD to make sure that licensing staff have access to information about what Every Child Belongs is. and what expectations are. And then we've also been really working closely with our regional partners to make sure they have information, a marketing toolkit that they can use for outreach in their communities, sharing more information about Every Child Belongs and resources available. And we're seeing that our regional partners are in many cases using those as the beginnings of their own communication strategy to create materials, whether that be a video or incorporate into other ways that they're connecting with providers to make sure that they're getting the word out and that communication is accurate and timely.
Great. Ruby.
Thank you. So we hear from providers, right? More bodies in the room. Sometimes that's the answer, sometimes it's not. Training is great. But there's a key aspect that I hear from providers as well of we can have all the training, but these kids aren't with us 24 hours a day. So there's another piece of it, that's the parent piece, right? And we have parenting education available throughout the state. And I wonder, and I know that there's like consultation with the families and the providers, that there's a process, right? For like a slow exit. How are we, or are we thinking about the alignment between what parents receive in terms of information and how they support their children's in these sort of developmental stages versus what techniques the providers are doing? Like I can see a world where there's alignment. Of course, we can't force any families to do parenting education, but I wonder if at the system level, we're thinking about what it looks like to have parallel sort of trainings or processes in the parenting education space as in the sort of provider space around these specific topics.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm thinking too about what Subin mentioned about our advisory committee. That's one of the places where we're looking at increasing, how we can get parent voice and talking through some of these things. So that might be a place where we bring that question or that topic that you brought up.
I think to add to what Lindsay said, I think that also goes to our system collaboration with OHA and looking at what can be developed or funded through a collaboration or through additional resources. Yeah, to make that possible. I also want to name that it's really there are children, there are a lot of children who've experienced some really rough things in their first few years of life. They've experienced trauma and they have those big behaviors, things that are really difficult to manage. So I don't want to minimize that at all. And I also want to say there are times and places where children get expelled for typically for normal behavior. And that really it isn't, I just feel the need to avoid pathologizing the child in the whole conversation of recognizing that providers may just need more support in knowing how to regulate themselves in the situation, or recognizing how do you get a group of 3-year-olds to line up before you go outside, or should you get a group of 3-year-olds to line up before you go outside. And so really recognizing there's a whole spectrum of behaviors and concerns that result in or can result in expulsion. And some of those are easier to resolve than others.
I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Marie.
Just briefly, I was curious if there was any conversation between, you've got an early Every Childhood Belongs system being created, and then they transition to K-12 and there's a system there. And so I just wondered if you could share a little bit about how you're thinking about those two systems and the experience of families and children as they work through those systems, knowing that they are different.
I think this is where our partnership with ODE is going to be key and continue to work through that together. But yeah, I would invite, Kara or John to speak more on that if you have things to add.
Well, absolutely. From the early childhood special education perspective, we think a lot and put a lot of energy into the transition into kindergarten. And there's some there are meetings that are had. There is involvement of the family. And I think to Lindsay's point, one of the things that we're also partnershiping on between the Department of Early Learning and Care and the Oregon Department of Education is some inclusion toolkits to support families and providers in understanding that kindergarten transition space, amongst other critical places of transition or other critical places of where children and families may be spending their time. And so creating some additional resources that providers and families can access. Yes. So we have some toolkits that we're working on. We also work with FACT to make toolkits available. So, we're really thinking a lot about that critical connection and how we ease transition into kindergarten. Lots of different things going on. I would also mention the early learning and kindergarten guidelines revision work that is happening in the Department of Early Learning and Care, and with partnership from the Department of Education is another place where we're really thinking about what does it look like to have a more cohesive system that really thinks about a child and family from birth all the way through grade 3. What does that look like?
Thanks for that. Robin, I wonder if you want to just share briefly what you put in the chat and put it on the record. Can I put you on the spot about your point about ODHS?
Sure. No, I just didn't want to take any more time, but I appreciated those additional thoughts and everybody's questions. I was just making a note that one of the data points was around children in foster care, that there was a certain number around that. So we haven't talked about ODHS in this particular conversation today, but it is part of that map that we did soup in together. And is there an opportunity? Because I'm just like, at the child at the center, wherever they go, they're in care. There's some challenges. They go back, and is the foster family or the resource family also getting support? I know when we were developing the model in Douglas County with the ESD around mental health consultation and childcare, one of the requests that was coming up at the time was children in foster care and the foster care families, resource families, needing mental health consultation in those settings as well. And so I just was wanting to pull ODHS into the conversation too. So thanks for asking.
Glad you mentioned that, Robin. It's a data point that I pay attention to each time that I pull the data. So currently it's at 10% of the requests a child is in foster care. We don't have that current link with ODHS, but it is one that's really important for us to look at together as part of that cross-system work and development. In order to, we also know in the state of Arkansas, children in foster care are the group of children that they have the hardest time preventing expulsion for. And so like asking those questions about how do we as a system respond proactively to provide supports to that resource family, to the to the child care provider, and to the child.
I just thank you. And I guess I want to say just one more thing that maybe I'm speaking to the choir, but I'm struck by how we've been coming at this. I know you all have been coming at it from many perspectives in your directions, but thinking about, retaining childcare, keeping kids in continuity of care and all the supports that they need. But when I think of the foster care population and other ACEs related experiences that kids have, and I think about our kids who are thriving at high school transition to adulthood, those who are doing okay, those who are not doing great, and those who are not going to graduate are on a negative trajectory. Like we know where the kids are right now, and they're telling us, I'm having trouble. And so like I just wanted to bring that back into the room. I know we all know that, but like the problem isn't just about sustaining childcare. It's not just about, it's these kids need us and they're telling us they're struggling. And so anyway, just reminded of where my heart is in all of this. Thank you.
I thank you guys all. This was such a rich conversation and so many very, I think, thoughtful connections, and the intentionality behind what you guys are doing, I think, is reflected in the conversation today. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll look forward to more updates as this final group of counties and regions come online, and you get some more data for us to pick through and ask questions about. Okay, let's move on to the ERDC waitlist refresh. Council, as you recall, many months ago now, I think last maybe June-ish, we heard from the ERDC team about their efforts to refresh the waitlist. And I have asked them to come back and let us know what happened as a result of that effort. So I will turn it over to, I think Jen's going to be taking the lead to start. So I will turn it over to you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. And this is one of my 2 presentations for you today. I'll be joining you a little bit later for the rule bundles, but my name is Jennifer Eras. I'm the lead childcare policy analyst for the Childcare Assistance Program team at DELC. So we primarily manage the ERDC program, as well as some other contracts that we have for teen parents and Head Start. But just giving you a really quick overview on what we saw happen with the waitlist refresh. So this was the first refresh that we've done of the waitlist since it was implemented in November 2023. It's also the first time we've ever had to do a refresh because we've never had a waitlist that has been implemented for quite this long. So here are the timelines on what exactly how long it took in the eyes of the families that we were asking to respond back to us. We wanted to make sure that we built an ample time for families to respond. So this was not a slow process for the CCAP team. I think it was a total of about 6 months worth of work for us to get this up and going, and we're hoping to have it automated within the next couple years. But essentially we started in August, and we sent letters out to all of the families that had been on the wait list for more than 12 months. We utilized a case note system in the one system, just so this gave transparency to ODHS staff. They would be able to pull up a case and see that that family had received the letter and that they were subject to the wait list. And they were also given instructions on how to help families respond. About 2 weeks after the letter, we sent a text nudge to any families that were subject to the wait list, or that had received the letter and that had also opted into the SMS texting. We sent another reminder letter at the very beginning of October. And again, 2 weeks after that, we sent an additional text nudge. The response window closed on December 31st. And so that was about 2.5 months that we had the response window open. We sent out decision notices to families on November 20th. And then from the 20th through the 11th, we had a time open for families who had received that letter saying they were removed to actually request an administrative review of their removal. So by the numbers, this is what we had. So again, these are only families that had been on the wait list for at least 12 months at the time that the data was pulled in the beginning of August. So it was 6,336 families. We had 1,533 who responded back saying, yes, they did want to remain on the wait list. We had very few respond back saying that they didn't want to be on the wait list, but we did have a handful of families that responded negatively saying that they didn't need it. So in total, we had 4,739 who were removed. 31 families requested an administrative review, and out of those 31 families, there were 15 that were added back on. So just examples of what happened with this, we had an individual who they updated their mailing address because it was missing the apartment number. So they updated it right after the second letter had been sent. So the first letter she received was the one saying that she was being removed. We had others where they talked to an ODHS staff member about wanting to stay on, but they didn't actually submit the request through our process, but they had case noted it. And then we had I think at least one where someone had called ODHS and asked for a meeting. So they called before the window closed, but the meeting wasn't scheduled until after the window closed. So those are some of the situations that happened with families who were added back on. We had 9 that were removed. These were essentially families that just said that they didn't think they had to respond and tell us anything, or that they just forgot to respond. And we had 7 individuals who just weren't subject to it. They didn't need an administrative review because they had either already responded and they weren't removed, or they were already receiving ERDC and they just had questions about their benefits. So somehow they just got the wrong email address and figured they'd send us a message. And just noting, like, these don't automatically add up because we did have 64 individuals who were actually receiving ERDC by the end of the waitlist refresh. So that was something that we didn't really foresee happening, is that the waitlist refresh letter actually prompted several families to come in and reapply for benefits. And so there were 64 families that found that they did need a current bypass and were eligible for ERDC by the time the process ended. And then some of the successes that we saw out of this, I know those numbers didn't seem all that big as far as response rates, but we've never seen a response rate of more than 20% on anything related to the ERDC waitlist. So like I said, we've never done a waitlist refresh before, but in the past with the waitlist, we have invited families off the waitlist to apply for benefits when their number has been pulled, or when we have space on the program. And with all of those requests to have families come in and apply, we could not get the number over a 20% response rate. And that was even with leveraging our folks at the direct pay unit to call every individual and let them know that their number was up and that they could come in and apply for benefits. So a 24% response rate was, we were pretty excited to see that number come back through. As far as the time frame, we didn't have any families telling us that it wasn't enough time for them to respond. So even with emergencies that had popped up, they still had enough time to respond. And this was a one thing that we noticed was that we had 211 families that were removed from the wait list who had out-of-state addresses. And I personally spoke with a few of them, and essentially they had just moved to Seattle or Utah, and they weren't planning on coming back, and they were not interested in remaining on the wait list. And in general, I did try to, I know I'm just one person, but I did try to reach out to families anytime there was something kind of questionable coming up to see what was happening with them. But in general, families were really happy to be just hearing something about the wait list and hearing that there was some sort of movement happening with it, because they were really frustrated at just sitting for that long and not having any movement happen with it. This isn't really the kind of movement that we're hoping for. We're really hoping to be able to start sending out invitations. But it was still encouraging them to hear that there was something that was potentially happening. And then the new count, so looking at the waitlist numbers in November, we had 15,100. And then after the families were removed, it was down to 11,400, which was essentially one of the things that we were tasked with doing, was to try and get a little better gauge of who is still interested in receiving benefits after so long, so that we could get a little better number to help the legislature in understanding what the actual need is. So, and I believe I just have this will go, there we go. Just open for questions, and I have not been watching the chat, so I apologize. I will pop over there and see if there's anything.
Any questions for Jen? Is the plan, I think when you presented this plan to us last summer, the plan is to do this on an annual basis. Is that correct? So this will start again in the fall, and you'll go through a similar process and timeline.
Yes, the timing, we wanted to have it so it was late enough that if funding was allocated during a long session, that we would be able to take action and invite families off the wait list before doing the process. But then it's early enough that we actually will have finalized numbers by the time the next legislative session is in process. So they'll have the most current numbers that we can get based on this.
Great. Any other questions or reflections for Jen? If not, Alyssa, are you on? I think you may be.
I am. I'm feeding a baby, but I'm here.
Welcome you and baby.
Thank you.
Did you have some updates you wanted to give the council about the short session in ERDC as well?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, so we have been working closely with the Legislative Fiscal Office and the DAS Chief Financial Office to try to address the budget needs for ERDC this biennium. One of the things we looked at is federal funds in particular, and we have had a higher than typical amount of what's called carry forward funds. These are dollars that we're allowed to spend federal dollars over multiple fiscal years, multiple federal fiscal years, unlike our state general fund dollars, which have to be spent within the biennium that they're awarded. And so we, sorry, we're able to identify additional funds of about 70 million to be able to address this biennium's projected shortfall for the program. That will allow us to continue exploring case management strategies because while it helps us address the shortfall this biennium, we still have a structural deficit with the program because our budget only supports a caseload of about 10,000 actively participating families. And that is just based on the available funds for the program. That caseload number could shift, for instance, with rate increases, right? So we also have been following legislation, Senate Bill 1535, that would give you all permission as the council to adopt new rules. Right now, statute says that rules shall prioritize families receiving TANF to accessing ERDC. This would change it to a may. And we've been working to define the different ways we can leverage the one system to implement different caseload management strategies. So it doesn't direct us to pause temporarily the TANF bypass, but it gives us that lever to pull if we need it as we think about how to get down to that sustainable budget caseload for the program going forward. So we know there's been a lot of concern about this, and we wanted to make sure that you all kind of got that update as short session is winding down, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Alyssa? Robin, do you have one?
Sure. I guess I feel like I'm talking way too much this time, but it seems like a really big topic to not say anything about. So Alyssa, thank you for giving us that update. I did understand that there were these other dollars that were going to be able to help. I noticed in some of our materials, and we're going to talk about more, where maybe there's a change in the line for the federal poverty level. And do you anticipate that changing how many it seems like it would obviously change how many we can serve. And as you're looking at all of these pressure levels and pressure pieces to this number, what are your hopes for going into the new year? Like, how can we be supportive and helpful as thought partners here at the ELC?
Yeah, thanks, Robin. We already are factoring in federal poverty level changes in our projections. So this wouldn't shift that. And this is also trying to leverage trend data now that we have it, now that the program has been with us for a few years and the policies have stopped shifting. But those projections can change if we start to see a shift in child age, for example. If suddenly there's a shift and we're seeing more infants, that cost per case is higher. And so, and I mentioned, rates, right? So there are a lot of factors when you think about hours, when you think about child age, when you think about setting, when you think about rates that make that 10,000 number a what we know now figure. And that could shrink in the future if some of those things go higher and we don't have additional funds. In terms of kind of council role and support, I think we would love to kind of understand the council's hopes or thoughts on how we prioritize access to subsidized care, knowing that even families that aren't qualifying for ERDC still can't afford childcare, recognizing that the TANF population is some of our most vulnerable families in the state. So we'll continue to be working very closely with advocates, with the governor's office, but I think we want to work closely with you all as well and kind of how this fits into your vision for Raise Up Oregon, recognizing the kind of constrained resource environment that we're working within.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And Liz, maybe we can all talk about what it looks like for us to have that time for that kind of conversation and the materials we would need to be prepared. Thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other questions for or feedback for Alyssa? Looks like we can move on. Thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Okay, we're gonna move on and we're just gonna push through council and go right into rulemaking. So I will turn it over to Gabby because I'm not sure who's going first.
Yeah. Of course. Thanks, Liz. So, council, for rulemaking today, we have two relatively short presentations and two rule sets up for adoption today. Jen is going to come back and just give a brief overview on some amendments for the employment-related daycare program. And then we also have Dana Young here, who will be presenting second to propose some temporary rule amendments for the Preschool Promise program. So with that, Jen, I will let you come back and take it away.
Alrighty, and I'm back, everyone. After a short intermission. I won't introduce myself again, and I know we've gone over these rules before, but I do want to point out we received a little bit of feedback, so there's been a little change on one of them. But I will just hop through this. So I'm sure you all are familiar with our overview of the ERDC program. Essentially, it's though the title does not fit it very well. We serve low-income working families. We serve families who are attending school, receiving temporary cash assistance, on medical leave from employment, or participating in certain child welfare programs. Those are all qualifying activities for the ERDC program. Primarily, we serve children under 12. But if they turn 13 during their certification period, or if they have additional needs, we will serve them up through 17. So we have 10 different rules in this rule set. We have little stars next to the ones that are primarily working on cleaning up some language that we have left over from when the rule set was pulled out of the 461 rules. We were combined together with multiple other programs, so we had some leftover language that we just keep finding. So we will go ahead and hop through those. The definitions rule, we had two primary changes to this. We removed the term custodial parent, since the ERDC program does not take into account legal custody of a child. The caretaker just has to be in care and control of the child, so there's not even a relationship requirement. So most of our families, they are custodial parents who who receive the benefits. It just didn't align with what our practice was. So we switched that to caretaker. And then we had also a definition of farmland, but this was specifically under income producing property. So farmland is only income producing property if someone is renting or leasing the land to someone else. If they're actually working that land and earning income from that work, that's considered self-employment income. So this was a really technical change, but it needed to be done to align with what the current processes are. And then our certification period rule. This one, we did find that there were reasons that a case could close in the middle of a certification, but they were spread out throughout the rule set, and it really didn't make sense to have them in multiple places. Makes it much harder for us to find, for ODHS staff to find, and also just for the general public, if they're looking through our rule set, it really made more sense to have it all together in the certification period. So these are things like if a family moves out of state, if a family goes over the income limits, or if they request a voluntary closure. These are all things that we needed to pull together in that certification period rule. And for our eligibility group structure, this again is cleanup. We had the term caretaker relative, which is very specific to TANF benefits and I believe some Medicaid benefits, and we just replaced that with caretaker. For 0023, the child care need and hours, this one, we actually had language that you all adopted last year in March 2025. And due to some version control issues, because we had another rule set that went through so quickly in July 25, we inadvertently lost some language. So there's at least one more in here that you'll see with the same thing happening. To address this and make sure that we don't have any of these issues in the future, the ERDC program is planning to move to just 2 major rule sets per year. So we would have one in January of each year and then one in typically July, might be June, depending on need. But the only changes that we really have to make in March are to those federal poverty limits. So our income limits and the copay tiers. We have to make those in March because we need to make sure we stay in alignment with other self-sufficiency programs as they make those updates and as we do the system updates. But considering that they're FPL updates, we're hoping to do those as a temporary rule set and then permanently adopt them in the June or July bundle as that goes through. So just having those 2 main rule bundles, we won't have one rule that is being updated back to back so closely, and we'll have a little better version control. And for prospective eligibility and budgeting, this is actually an exciting one. This is doing something really neat. So currently in the system, actually next week it won't be happening, but currently in the system, when someone is added to an ERDC household or an ERDC case and they have income, that income actually impacts the family's copay. It could increase their copay, and it could potentially push them over the income limits. If they go over the income limits, that's okay if we close that case, but we can't increase their copay based on federal requirements and the federal regulations. We had received some clarification at our federal visit that this is not in compliance with CCDF requirements, and so we have a change that's going through that will stop those copays from increasing. Again, if the family goes over that exit limit, we still have to close the case, but we don't have to increase the copay. So the new person and their income will be taken into consideration on the copay calculation when the family recertifies their case next. So they'll have the rest of their 12-month eligibility with the same copay that they were expecting, and then they will they'll have some time for that to be adjusted later. There's one other rule related to this. It's not the next one, but the one after that. So just noting that the 0050 income limits and copays, this is changing we're updating to the 2026 federal poverty limits and updating the state median income. So it impacts our initial income limit, our exit limit, but it also changes those copay tiers. So if you recall, like just as an example, anyone under 100% of the federal poverty limit, their copay is waived. So this moves that up just a little bit. It doesn't move it a whole lot. We don't see a whole lot of families impacted, but we may see a few families seeing their copay reduce a little bit if they were right on the line between some of those copay tiers. And we have, I believe it's 6 different copay tiers. And so all of those are just moving just a bit. And then back to the other change. So this is essentially describing when that new individual's income will be counted against the case. The way we had it worded, it inadvertently would have not counted the income against the exit limit, which we're not allowed to do. We'd have to pay for that out of state general fund if we wanted to do that. And so that was some feedback that we received through the DELC policy team when we were going over the language. And so we did make some adjustments to the language just to make it very clear that copays do not increase during a certification period, like just they don't increase. And then also that income is still counted against the exit limit, but not counted against the copay. And this rule change is a mix of two different things. So we did have, again, some version control. We lost some of our outdoor nature-based programs language between the March and July bundles. So we're just reinstating that as it was. But also effective March 1st, we're increasing rates for our family, friend, and neighbor providers. So those are the providers represented by SEIU. And with the provider structure, we have two different provider unions that we work with. There's AFSCME that represents the home-based licensed providers. SEIU represents the license exempt home-based providers, and then centers actually are not represented by a union. But we were able to work through, like, the collective bargaining agreement for AFSCME was finalized in time for us to get their rate increases effective January 1st. So if you remember, with that January bundle, we increased for licensed home-based and centers because we had all the things that we needed. We just had some slow responses from SEIU. Originally, we were going to open up and do a full bargaining, but in the last minute, they just asked to extend their previous contract and sign I think it's a letter of agreement for the new rate charts. So those will be effective March 1st. We've already sent letters out to all of the providers. It's an insert for the provider guide, as well as emailed any providers that we have an email address for. Those rates should be updated on our website. If not yesterday, they should be updated today. We have a little bit of a balancing act because we don't want to update the rates online too early. These rate increases are for care that's provided effective March 1st. So that's why we have the timing of that. It's not for February care. Regardless of when they turn in those billing forms, it'll still pay at the lower rate. And then this was also a piece that we recognized in the January rule bundle when we were working with inclusive partners for our high needs childcare payments, but it was outside the scope of the rule change that we were doing in January. So we brought it back to make some updates, but essentially current practice says that a child's, the documentation showing that a child has additional needs can also include private therapies and behavioral or mental health services. So these are additional pathways that already existed, they just weren't reflected in rule. So we have added those into the rule to make sure that we have all of those pathways identified. And again, it's not increasing access, it's not changing current practice, it's just making sure we have detailed out what the current practice fully includes. And then this has a twofold again. So we have that caretaker relative term that we don't really use. So we switched that over to caretaker, but we also had a piece, again, where current practice wasn't reflected in rule, in a situation where you have a child care provider who's going into the child's home. So they live somewhere else and they're going to the child's home to provide care. Our practice has always been that we only do a background check on the provider. We don't do a background check on the child's parents, their older siblings that live in the home with them, anyone else who might frequent that home, because the child care provider is really the new entity in this situation. So this is just clarifying, in those situations, we only do a background check on the child care provider. Now, if the provider lives in the same home as the child, it is every adult in the household is subject to that background check. But this is just in those, we call them in-home provider situations. So in those situations, that's the only check that is needed. And here's the information that we had on our March 1st RAC. We had really good participation. Most of the conversation, though, was really about the January 1st rate increases. So we didn't get a whole lot of feedback out of the RAC on any changes that needed to be done on this rule set. But it still was really, really great conversation we had with them and a great participation from the group.
Jen, just clarifying, your RAC was in January. You said March.
Oh, oh goodness. Oh, now I'm pressing all the wrong buttons.
No, sorry. I didn't mean to throw you off. I just wanted to put that on the record. The RAC was back in January.
Sorry,
and March 1st is the effective date for the rules.
Yes, they're effective for March 1st. My apologies. And then I couldn't get to where I could back up my slides so I could get to the timelines, but really the timelines are just saying that The vote is today and they'll be effective March 1st. So on Sunday is when they'll be effective if they pass.
Great. Any questions for Jen? If not, could I get a motion, Katie?
Yes. I move to adopt the proposed permanent rule language amendments dated February 25th, 2026 that adopt amendments to Oregon Administrative Rules as listed on the council action request for the employment-related daycare rule set amendments.
Is there a second?
Second, this is Eric.
It's been moved and seconded. Gabby, can you call the roll?
You're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, yes. Give me one sec. Let me pull up my vote doc. Okay, so Chair Campbell,
Yes.
Katie Brooks,
Yes.
Peter Buckley,
Yes.
Robin Hill Dunbar,
Yes.
Eric Hunter,
Yes.
Dr. Peg Miller,
Yes.
Subin O,
Yes.
Ruby Ramirez,
Yes.
Anne Marie Simons.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries and the rules are adopted.
Yay.
Thank
All
you all
right.
so much for your time today.
Thanks, Jen. And we'll see you again probably in a few months with another bundle, right?
Yes, but after that, I'll be less frequent, I promise.
Okay, let's move into the preschool promise temporary rules.
Dana, I
Very
have
good.
slides
Oh,
ready.
go ahead, Gabby.
No, sorry, go ahead. I was just saying I have your slides ready whenever you're ready to go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dana Young. I'm the Preschool Promise Program Manager here for the department. I'm coming here today for an amendment for our housing adjustment revision for our rules. Next slide. Gabby. Okay, thank you. Just a quick overview about Preschool Promise. Preschool Promise is a free publicly funded program currently serving families at or below the 200% of the poverty level. Currently, we are all across 36 counties across the state. Delivering a high quality opportunity to children ages 3 to 5 in a mixed delivery model. So that means that we are contracting with different entities to be able to provide families with the opportunity to receive Preschool Promise, whether it's in a home base, center base, or a school district. So we are partnering with many entities across the state, including other publicly funded programs like Arbor Relief Nurseries, Head Start programs, and some of the other organizations here across the state. We are really grounded on providing those parents with the ability to access a high quality preschool opportunity in whatever setting meets their needs. Next slide. Okay, so what is the rulemaking need that we have? We are proposing to go ahead and adopt a temporary amendment on OAR 414-474-0010 to establish a new method of determining income eligibility. As I explained, we aim to go ahead and serve families that are at or below the 200% of the poverty level. With this amendment, it will allow our eligibility staff to be able to take into account housing costs for the family. So if the housing cost exceeds 30%, they will be able to go ahead and adjust their income in order to be able to see if they qualify for our services. And they will be able to do that with, reviewing some documentation like bills, bank statements, in order to go ahead and calculate those annual housing expenses. Next slide. So why are we doing this? Because we are noticing that there's a very high increase in housing costs. As someone mentioned earlier, many of our families are still needing services and access to high quality preschool. Go ahead and give the example of Multnomah. That is a county where housing costs are really high. So we still have a lot of families needing services. So our ability to be able to account for those housing costs and provide that flexibility will allow them to maybe be eligible for Preschool Promise. In addition to that, back in August 2024, our Head Start, the Office of Head Start actually introduced this housing cost into their model for determining eligibility. So by us adopting this amendment, it will also create some alignment in how some of these eligibility specialists are determining income eligibility. That way they don't have to do it for some families and not for others. Many of our Preschool Promise grantees our programs are dual funded programs, so that will go ahead and reduce some of the burden for those eligibility specialists too. Next slide. And here's just an overview of what the amendment is going to look like. We're really trying to amend. I won't read every single bullet. So you can tell there's a lot of different bullets there that we're trying to really provide that guidance for how and when should we account for that housing income to be able to go ahead and help families. So we are asking for an amendment on, -0010, a little I all the way to a VI to allow for flexibility and also instructions for the eligibility specialists. Next. What is our timeline? We're looking to go ahead and move this, by March 1st. So with you reviewing it today, making a vote, then that rule will go ahead and come, into effect March 1st. And then later on in the spring, we are looking to go through a full permanent rulemaking process for Preschool Promise. So that is something that we're intending to start in April. Not April. Well, I guess it will be the spring of 2026. Sorry. Any questions?
Questions for Dana? I will just say I always appreciate when the agency makes an effort to try to align between programs, because we see that as being something that's so tricky, especially for providers, and to navigate is different rules for OPK than Preschool Promise than ERDC. So I appreciate the effort to try to align this with what OPK is already doing, or what Head Start is doing. So
absolutely, thank you.
Any other questions or feedback? If not, could I get a motion, Subin?
Yeah, I move to adopt the proposed permanent rule language amendments dated February 25th, 2026 that adopt amendments to Oregon administrative rules as listed on the council action request for the Preschool Promise program rule set.
Subin, I apologize. I had a typo in there. It is the proposed temporary rule language amendment. Just wanted to make that distinction on the record. I'm sorry.
Should I reread with the changed language? Or?
Yes.
Let's go ahead and do that.
I will resend it. Give me one sec.
Okay.
Proposed
temporary.
Yes.
Okay. All right, got it. I move to adopt the proposed temporary rule language amendments dated February 25, 2026 that adopt amendments to Oregon administrative rules as listed on the council action request for the Preschool Promise program rule set.
Is there a second?
I'll second. That's Peg.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the temporary rule language amendments. Gabby, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Chair Farrar Campbell?
Yes.
Katie Brooks?
Yes.
Peter Buckley?
Yes.
Robin Hill Dunbar?
Yes.
Eric Hunter?
Yes.
Dr. Peg Miller?
Yes.
Subin O?
Yes.
Ruby Ramirez?
Yes.
Anne Marie Simons?
Yes.
Perfect. The motion passes, and we will be adopting temporary rule language for the Preschool Promise program.
Wonderful. All right, Council. Well, it is 12:26. We are at the end of the agenda. Did anybody have anything they wanted to share for the good of the order? Thank you for a very robust and I think very deep discussion today. We had some great conversations. So looking forward to seeing you all in March in person. Gabby will be sending out some more information about lodging and what to expect for that. That will be a home visiting focused meeting. So the Coves team is working closely with Gabby and I to put that agenda together, and hope to see you all in Salem next month. All right, I will go ahead. It's 12:27. I'll adjourn the meeting.